So if you have something that is useful, you want to use it. If you have a car, you don't use it all the time, but it is there for driving. It doesn't live in your garage on the drive. Especially you think of a light or a torch or a candle. It is to light things so you see better by it. To state the obvious, a light is for shining. Now, you may want to save it for a special moment, but nonetheless, it's there to be used. And that's the parable that Jesus tells us that we're looking at this morning. Now, what we're doing this term is we're continuing through Mark. Often what I do is in the morning, we change each term. And so often we look at a gospel from the beginning of the year to Easter, and something else in the New Testament up to the summer. But it just felt we've only really got started. So we've got to chapter 4. We're in the parables. And the main point of the parables, these ones at least, Jesus is saying, listen. So over all of Mark, as the graphic behind me says, it's about meeting Jesus. And what we saw as increasingly as we've gone through, that is supernatural, but also it happens ordinary, in an ordinary way. It happens through his word. So this parable emphasizes listen and what you do when you listen. And what we've seen, particularly as we got into chapter 3 and 4, is there's a surprise in Mark as to who listens and who doesn't listen. And we noticed that particularly a couple of weeks ago, we looked at the parable of the sower, sometimes called the parable of the seed, rightly called the parable of the soils. Because the sower and the seed is the same through the parable. What makes the difference to the outcome is the type of soil that's sowed on. And so we saw there's a supernatural aspect of Jesus opening people's eyes to understand and to see who he is. But in this parable, emphasizes how you listen. So if the last parable is God's part in you hearing, this part is your part in listening. Your responsibility is listen. And that's something we noticed about parables, we saw last week, is they, in one sense, they obscure Jesus. In verse 12, Jesus says, quoting Isaiah, that he uses parables so people don't understand, they don't see. They act as a filter. So some people are drawn in by the parable, and other people go, nah, it's too hard, and just leave it. And what we see here is he applies what we know. So there's two related parables about listening to Jesus, and both are used by Jesus elsewhere in the Gospels, but here they're used in a related way, but they're used in slightly different ways, and it's important we see the difference. So two simple points I want us to think about. First, Jesus for shining, and secondly, is Jesus' economics for listening. So I normally have a thing to press. The batteries have run out. So Haddon is my prodder this morning. So I'm going to be like, if you remember those horrible days of COVID where they'd go, next slide, please. I'm going to do something like that, or I'll try. So next slide, please. Jesus is for shining. And the illustration is used in Matthew and Luke, where we are the light, and you don't hide the light. The light is to shine out. But it's slightly different here. So the Greek, and I've got a slide for this, the light comes. So it's the light comes. Now, so the way it's worded is like the light comes under its own will. So in almost every English translation, they go, well, that doesn't make sense. And let's tidy it up and put it into good English. The thing is, it's not in good Greek, as if I really know what that meant, but it's not. And it's different how Jesus uses it in Matthew and Luke. So the context here is it comes before and after things about listening to Jesus. It's saying, Jesus, the light comes. And why does he come? Verse 21, not to be hidden under a basket or a bed. So rather, it's on a stand. And that sounds obvious, doesn't it? You don't switch on your torch or light a candle to hide it. Why would you light it in the first place? But it's to be seen. Jesus, or rather, as we've already seen, Jesus is hidden to some. We saw that in chapters 3 and 4, the Jewish establishment, his own family. They don't understand him. But verse 12, Jesus warns people will see, but they'll not see. They will hear, but they won't really hear. And the parable themselves obscure him in a sense. He is hidden. But that's not the end. That's not the point. He's come not to be hidden, but to be seen, to be put on a stand. For a time, to some he is hidden, but, verse 22, Jesus came to be known and be made known. So in verse 22, it says, "But nothing is hidden except to be made manifest, nor is anything secret except to come to the light." He was hidden, but he's been brought out. Jesus did not come to hide. He will be revealed. He will be brought out into the open. Now, how does that happen? Well, there's an ultimate sense when he returns, everyone will see. But before that, little by little, he's made known by his word. Now, in this chapter, there's an inside and outside contrast. So those inside get Jesus, and those outside, he's a mystery. But what's the difference between inside and outside? Well, in this parable, it's self-selecting. Jesus is hidden, or he may be hidden, but he's not hiding. He's hidden in plain sight. Jesus is a mystery, but it is an open mystery. He's a secret, but a secret that's been made known. So a couple of Bible verses elsewhere, I won't read them, but Ephesians 3:2-6, we're told Jesus is a mystery, long hidden, but made known. In Acts 26, Paul speaking to Agrippa, he says the events and the news about Jesus have been made public. They're not hidden in a corner. So Jesus came to be known. He is on display. Jesus came to shine like a lamp. He is the lamp that has come. There's a contrast here with some, what we might call mystery religions and sects then and now. So at the time of Jesus, it was sort of beginning to be popular, became popular over the next couple of hundred years, was the mystery religions. What is a mystery religion? Well, you have to join to find out. That's what a mystery religion is. And some were sort of centered on Jesus, but it was about secret knowledge. And you have to join that group to know, and then it's revealed to you. And there's versions of that today. So most common ones that people would know about in this country would be Freemasonry or the Orange Order, which is a distinctly Protestant group. But there's some aspect of secrecy about them. Now, for some, it's a bit of silliness and fun. Others in it, they take it more seriously. And I think there's churchy versions of this. So there's a mystical form of Christianity, isn't there? And that comes in a couple of ways. It might be what we describe colloquially as up the candle, or a more charismatic, where you have to do this or be there to experience more of Jesus. So there's a deluxe version that is not open to everyone, but you can come in to our secret knowledge to experience more of him. Otherwise, he's a mystery. But it creeps in closer to home, to churches like us, we might say. If you've ever heard this, and apologies if it's ever been me, is we have a special church. We have what others do not have. And you have to come to experience it, or you'll miss out. Only our church really has it. Now, I've been a part of a couple of churches a bit like that, but it's actually becoming the same, a mystery. But the point of the gospel, the point of Jesus coming, is it's in the open. The mystery is, and the secret has been made known. And there's a challenge that Jesus makes, repeated through chapter 4, which is verse 23. If anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. He's saying, listen carefully. You don't have to go through special filters and routines to do that. Just listen. Jesus is not out of reach. He's not hidden away. He often speaks in parables. And what does that do? It makes you slow down and pay attention, and it filters out the disinterested. But it's not, I have said it's supernatural, but it's not about being super spiritual. You don't have to be special. You don't have to be clever. Now, if you read the Bible and sometimes you go, hard work. Yes, that's hard work, but it's not impossible. It just slows you down. So you have to pay attention, and we help each other. And often you hear very clever people just totally missed the point with Jesus. They're just not listening. Jesus came to shine his light. He does so as the seed is scattered, his word is scattered. Talked about last time. Jesus is known by his word. And that word comes through his people. So we have to listen. And if we've listened, we'll pass it on. As we pass on, it doesn't need to be spiced up. Do you remember Kanye West was talking about his, I don't know what he really believes, but he was talking about his found faith a couple of years ago, and he said, Jesus needs no sauce. Pretty good summary, really. Jesus doesn't need any sauce. You don't need to make Jesus attractive, because Jesus is attractive. You know, sometimes we want to tart something as we look around the room, and you're aware that you are in a lecture room. Put some flowers, make it look a bit more church at this point, at least. Makes me look more attractive. How do you make something look more attractive? You take something that is more attractive and put it near it or on it. But Jesus is the most attractive thing. There is nothing to adorn him with, because he is the most attractive person, the most attractive thing. We don't need to make Jesus appealing. What we need to do with Jesus is put him on a stand to be seen. The next thing Jesus says is these economics of listening, if I can use that word, in verses 24 to 25. So recent years, we've been introduced to what's been called Trussonomics and Corbonomics. And those who put into bat to defend them, the gist is they're counterintuitive. You might not think it's going to work, but it's counterintuitive. At worst, it's bonkers who's going to leave us all in ruin. Take your pick. Jesus has his own version of economics, and it is counterintuitive, but it does work. And this is a phrase used elsewhere by Jesus and used here. With the measure you use, it will be measured to you, and still more will be added to you. That's his economics. So here, Jesus applies it to the gospel and listening to him. But elsewhere, he uses it in different ways, but it relates. So one way he uses it is to do with money and generosity. And he uses the same words, and it means what you give, you get back and more. Not necessarily money, but it doesn't exclude that. That's the problem with the prosperity gospel. Got a little bit of truth in it. But God will always outbless your giving. So if you give and you give generously, you will find some sort of return that is bigger than you gave. That's Jesus' economics. What you give away, you get back. Another place Jesus uses it is applied to judging and judgmentalism. So the measure you use to judge others will come back to you. Jesus' economics, what you dish out, you will get back, good or bad. Here, he uses it about how you receive and use the gospel. So what impact does the gospel have on you? What do you do with it? And he puts it positively, he puts it negatively. So positively, if you receive the gospel with joy, more will be added to you. As you receive, we hold up Jesus on a stand, more will be added to you. So verse 25, for the one who has, more will be given. So as we hold up Jesus, more is added to us. How does that work? Well, probably in a few ways, but as we teach and share Jesus, we know him more. I'll give you some examples. Some of you here are involved in young people's work. And so you prepare a session and then you deliver the session. And sometimes, I can see when the people come down, sometimes they look really encouraged and sometimes less so. It hadn't gone to plan. But what happens? The kids get something from it. We find out over time they have been getting things from that. But you end up knowing Jesus more. Same happens with me. I prepare a sermon and I get some idea of what this is about. And as I prepare it, I know more. So this isn't the first time I've read this bit of Mark 4. But as I prepared it and read it a few times and in context, read some books that helped me, I know more. I get excited about that. And what I want to do is give you a 2-hour summary of what I've picked up and learned. I realize that may be counterproductive. So what do is I go back at what I've learned. I try and get what's the nub. I show you the working out. So I'm working out, so I don't just say, it means this, do this, And you'd have every right to say, why should I listen to you? So the idea is I haven't made it up. I've rubbed your nose in it, but I give you the nub of what it's about. And as I ponder, what's the heart of this? What's the underlying thing here? It means I've learned even more again. So the aim of a sermon is we hear the Bible read, we hear it proclaimed, it preached, and God speaks that way, and it's applied to our hearts, and you're built up. That's what should happen. But usually, the preacher more so. That's the perk of the job. So Jesus' economics is what you give away, you get back more. And it's true when we share the gospel. Give the gospel away. You put Jesus on a stand to shine. You know him more for yourself. Not just know more about him. That's often true because in discussion you realize what you need to sharpen on. But it feels you actually know him better that way. And not surprising when you think about it. At the end of Matthew's gospel, he says, I am with you always. Great. But it's a conditional clause. He says, go. You go, and I am with you always. Elsewhere in Matthew as well, he talks about being with us when we're sharing the gospel, when we're put on the spot. You know, a situation where you're put on the spot, I'm not ready for this. There he comes and meets with us. When we give Jesus away, we know him more. And that's the parable of the soils again, isn't it? That the sowing ends in fruit. Now, sometimes via rejection and things not quite as planned, but the end thing is fruit. Now, the same with the negative. So, end of verse 25, and from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. If you do not receive Jesus with joy, if you do not listen, there will be no joy. Any little joy you have will be taken from you. If you do not share him, what you have from him, you risk loss. The light is for putting on a stand and not for us to cover up. That's not our job. Now, I don't want to use guilt in talking about this sort of thing. This is the sort of thing that we can all feel guilty about, including myself. Neither do I want to dodge the issue. It's a passage that's not just for ministers or professional Christians, whatever we mean by that. It's for all of us. But we don't want to be hyper-Western. It's not just about the individual Christian. It's about us as a church body. I think it's very relevant to us now. We've been talking about, dare I even bring it up, is we've been talking about considering building. So we rent this space. We're talking about the impossibility that we'll try and make possible of purchasing a building. And the reason why I bring this up is I know some churches that were in the same situation as us. They considered buildings even more ambitious than what we've looked at. And they got them. Wonderful answer to prayer. And it was against all, absolutely amazing. But in the build-up, every sermon became about, I'm realizing the irony as I'm saying it, every sermon became about buildings, every week. And why we must get this building. And you need to be behind it. If you're not behind it, you're sinning or deficient in some way. Once it all wonderfully comes together, then there's a challenge. Then there's division. Then there's decline. Why? Not in every situation, but a few I know. Because the building had become the thing. And what they end up with is something that's cozy and safe, and we've achieved our end. Job done. And so for us, a building, whether God grants us one or not, or how he answers that prayer, the building is to serve Christ and his purpose, not us. If we think about serving us, the problem with that is, I know we can all do this and dress it up as it's serving Jesus, but it's us. The problem with it when it's serving us is we each have our own idea of what that is. Our mission is to hold out Christ, have Christ on a stand, not to self-perpetuate an organisation. If Jesus builds his church best without CPC, we just take that on the chin. I don't think that's right, but if. It's not just about buying buildings. It's any way where the mission, somehow, our mission, eclipses Jesus' mission, eclipses Jesus. Now, I've mentioned this before because sometimes I've been involved in sort of the pastoral support end, and I've read some books about abuse cases of various kinds in church and Christian organisations. I've always thought, how did that happen? What's the common factor between these? And as far as I can work out, as I trace back upstream where these come from, it's when their mission eclipsed Jesus. I'll give you a couple of less harmful, trivial examples from previous churches. So one church I was at was not much bigger than this one, but they had several home groups. I can make you feel guilty. They had several home groups. One of those groups was very quirky. And one of those groups was the dream home group you want to be a part of. They loved each other. They got on well. Everyone contributes in discussion, hospitality, and it's led well. And the minister suggested that the dream team had got too cozy and they should split into 2 or 3 groups and allow new people, there's a few new people at church, they should join. And they just refused. No, we're not splitting up. This is the best home group ever. They just become too cozy and nice. What happened very quickly? Attendance was less frequent. Discussions were weirder. People were less regular. Just the whole thing started just not being very good. Now, the quirky group, most of them have now been promoted. They're in glory. But as far as I was in touch with them, the quirky group always remained quirky. But they did things like they did a guest barbecue and they had an evangelistic talk in the barbecue. Knowing them, that had always had the potential of being a bit weird as well. But the group grew. They were happy. They were blessed. No doubt we can think of churches that are known, historically known, for great preaching, being sound, doing good things, believing the right things, being large usually. And after a generation, they just tail off and so start to fade out. Why does that happen? Why are these life cycles in churches? Verse 25. From the one who has nothing, even what he has will be taken away. Even what he has been taken away. He has nothing. Because the lamp has not come to be hidden. And so this is a summary of that. You lose what you keep, you gain what you throw away. You lose what you keep and you gain what you throw away. And so the parable that starts to apply the soils, and over the next few weeks, the next parables apply the soils a bit more. It's about listening and what we do as we listen. If you like to use a modern term, it's about active listening. So listening is not one way. So as you observe scientifically, if you understand any physics, Ben read this passage earlier. I'm preaching on it. Sound waves start from here and they go out to where you are. But that's not what should be happening. It's active listening. It's a two-way thing. Listen carefully. Make sure you've heard him right. Jesus is the lamp for shining. And Jesus has an economics of receiving him. And this applies in 2 ways, I think, or maybe a few ways. It applies in 2 ways for both Christian and non-Christian alike. What we have to do is the same. Listen carefully. Jesus is not hiding. And so don't hide from him. It requires attention, but it's not actually hard. God, by his Spirit, will help you. And that's why he's put us in a church family to help each other. Jesus came to shine, not to be obscured. Listen. But because he came to shine, and that by his word, our job, individually and as a church in particular, is put him on a stand so others hear him and so by faith see him. And the economics of Jesus is the position that you take with him will be exaggerated. No joy in receiving him leads to no joy. Hide him away, he will increasingly be hidden from you. Receive him with joy and give him away, and he will be added to you.